feedback when you go near it?
I don't know.
Right. Stop it.
Hey? Am I talking? How's that? Alright. Going to start in about 5, 6, 7 minutes, something like that. In the meantime, did anyone notice anything over the last few days? The momentous and surprising vote to leave the EU. One or two are a little bit upset about it. Apparently about 3 million. They're interested in referendum part 2, and because we apparently got it wrong first time, a little bit like Ireland. I've got a suggestion for them: move to Scotland or even Turkey. You've seen me back in. Good evening. If you do have a mobile, if you'd like to put it on silent, please. Thanks very much. Right, massive welcome to Mark Cocking, scholar, druid, a member of the banking industry, whose presentation is entitled The Unification of All Knowledge. Mark dips into a wide and deep pool of resources from religion, the occult, natural science, mathematics, Freemasonry, business, and the political world in an attempt to piece together fragmentary wisdom with a view to enlightening us in these unusual times. Please welcome Mark Cocking.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Genuinely, I expected 3 people here tonight. Is anyone keeping tabs on the football?
Yeah.
No? If don't let me know, yeah. Where do you start? Because these are strange times. I kind of got left high and dry. Had this talk been last week, it would have been on a similar subject, but much more to do with the European thing. But I don't need to. The talk tonight is about all of these things here, actually. And it really is a question of spot them, because I'm talking largely about numbers, mathematics. Don't worry, I promise you, I'm not good at maths. You don't need to be good at maths for what we're doing tonight. You don't need to get into the intricacies of sacred geometry. That is, in fact, the point I'll be making. I'll show you something which might just cut through all of that. But that unfolds. As I was saying, these are strange times and powerful. We're rocking at the moment in the wake of the EU referendum. As I say, England are playing Iceland at the moment. The only country to kick the bankers out in the right way when they had the chance. So it seems fitting to talk about strange and powerful things tonight. I'd like to start with a brief oratory to reflect in some way upon the dynamics and the energies that we have now, today, as a result of the referendum and everything else that's going on, and the abuse of political and financial power, which leaves us all with a moral, spiritual, intellectual, and political equation to solve at the moment. I don't orate normally, so forgive me if I kind of cock this up. Power and impunity do not bestow any rights. The criminal's dignity and power do not lessen his vice, and less offensive names and euphemisms do not change the core of the matter. The land theft committed under the lustrous name of conqueror, which goes unpunished and is often admired and celebrated, is no more honest than the appropriation of private property. In the eyes of any reasonable man, the art of war is nothing more than the systematic art of murder, elevated to a matter worthy of contemplation, intellectual exercise, and emulation. It is true that justice, ambition, pride, vanity, and greed are praised by entire nations as a means for aggrandizement under the names of bravery, patriotism, and self-defense. Nonetheless, these are no less dangerous and, in fact, in the case of entire nations, even more damaging and illicit than with individuals, since the effects are even more universal and destructive, and they are, in both cases, misconceived interest. the untimely and excessive appreciation of one's self, and too high an estimation of one's force, and the subsequent hope of impunity. Nations are large families, moral persons. Like individual men, they have their origins and their downfall, their life and their death, and like these, they attempt to prolong their existence and remove everything that opposes it. Like these, they can be wrong when selecting the means for this, allowing themselves to be seduced by glittering proposals and short-term advantages into taking the wrong measures. They have reason and they have unreason. They have their own inclinations and passions, lesser and greater needs, and for this they need the help and the benevolence of their fellow nations. Therefore, they enter into mutual relationships with one another, and to this end, they are bound to benevolence and justice. They have their obligations and they have their rights. True love for themselves, a desire and a demand for their continued existences and life. The situation and circumstances in which they find themselves, these countries of ours, and the needs they feel, and the impossibility of satisfying these needs on their own, are the legislators of even the most independent nations. And they oblige them not to transgress against the rights of others, nor to view themselves as the goal and all others as the means to that goal, but to be satisfied with the undisturbed possession of their own property, and to curb excessive desire for expansion and the rightful possessions of others. Their own continued welfare must teach them that abstaining from encroaching on the rights of others ensures their own rights, that violence begets violence, that strength and superiority has not in any way been given to nations or to individual persons to abuse them and harm others. Speak not of the enlightenment and morality of an age in which war is the reigning custom among nations. Only with a moral regimen, things thought to be impossible, all previously ridiculed political dreams and Platonic ideals become possible. The power abused and the ubiquitous selfishness of men have incited general mistrust and closed the hearts of men to one another to the extent that today everyone must prove to another the honesty of his intentions, whilst rarely being capable of presenting his evidence convincingly enough to dissipate all doubts and concerns. Almost all of our actions and institutions bear a visible stamp of this general mistrust. Only a moral doctrine is capable of eradicating this mistrust among men, for it teaches temperance and moderation. It teaches them to content themselves with less, to lessen their bodily needs in order to exalt the needs of the spirit. It teaches them insight into their true interests, and a man or a woman who knows this cannot be unruly, unjust, or dangerous. That, anyone ever heard that? That was the knight's initiation into the Bavarian Illuminati. Okay. I wanted to start with that just to set a tone. Because the Illuminati, put your hand up if you believe in the Illuminati, please. Yeah? Most people kind of thing. Put your hand up if you know what they are. We've got 1, 2, 3. Oh no, they're getting brave. Right, cool. That was the knight's initiation, a top initiation into the Bavarian Illuminati. I wonder if you found anything too horrific in that speech, that dedication that made that person evil. Right, onwards. Sacred geometry, profane math. I was talking to Theo Chalmers a few weeks ago, and he said, what are you going to be talking about? I said, I don't know. It's going to have something to do with numbers and putting it all together. And he said, why don't you just call it profane math? So, there you go. Thank you, Theo. I didn't just call it that, though. This picture here You've probably seen this knocking around the internet nowadays. It shows you a graphic of how the Earth and the Moon and their orbits all tie in.
Can you try standing
Sorry,
in the middle of the mic? Sorry.
that's better. They all tie in to the number 2732. You don't need to worry yourselves about the numbers, just take note of certain numbers as they keep cropping up. So, first part of the maths lesson. Don't be put off by this. This is deliberate, this is simple, it's not to test anybody, okay? There we go. The law of averages. Do you remember this from school? Just very briefly, there's 3 different kinds of average. You've got the mean, where you add them up and divide by the number of figures. The median, you arrange them, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go through all of this necessarily. Does anyone not understand how to work out an average or a mean? Right. Then I'll hit you with the last bit. The median. That one is where you arrange the lowest to the highest and then you literally pick out the middle number. And that's your median. You might say, what if there's an even number of numbers to pick from? You pick the middle 2 and average them. All right. You don't need to get this though. I'm literally reminding you of stuff, so don't worry if you don't. Beyond the law of averages, you had this other one. Do you remember this at school? The laws of minus numbers and how to add minus numbers together. And again, the laws were fairly simple, but I never remembered these. You kind of work them out when you're doing it. But a positive number is simply a number that's greater than 0. It means nothing more than that, and a negative is less. 0, wanting to patronize you, is neither. Yeah, this is the level of simplicity I want to get over to you because we don't get much more complicated than this. The rules for adding numbers of the same sign is there, and the rules for adding negative and positive numbers is there also. I talk you through it, but as I say, it's not really necessary. I'm just trying to remind you of these things. The next math lesson, subtracting and multiplying numbers of different signs. Is there anyone in the room who actually remembers doing this at school and could go, yeah, I know all of this? There's a hand up in the back, yeah? And you can remember doing this sort of thing, right? I'm not going to go through them. They'll be on the slides for you later if you want to look at it. Which brings us to another thing, and you would come across this at school, and this is the square root. And this is the one that does confuse people. So, again, a show of hands if you haven't got a clue what a square root is, please. Oh, that's good. No one. Excellent. I'll still go through it. The square of a number is simply that number multiplied by itself. That's all you ever need to remember if you didn't know in the first place. The square root of that number is the number which multiplied by itself gives that number. I won't bore you with this because no one put their hand up. Oh. Yeah, 1 is the square root of 1. We all understand that, don't we? I is the imaginary number which represents the square root of -1. And you can't have a square root of minus number because if you multiply it by itself it becomes a positive. All right? That simple rule is critical to everything that you will see later. So I'll emphasize that for you now. And every positive number has 2 roots by definition. It has its number and its negative, because when you multiply the negatives, it becomes the positive number. So every number has 2 roots. So, thinking outside the box, 4 cubed, 4, you know what that means. It means 4 cubed, which is 4 times 4 times 4. 4 cubed is a good number for anyone interested in sacred geometry, because it brings you to 64. That's, in esoteric terms, called the square of the octave. We'll be coming back to that. So 64 is therefore the cube of 4, and 4 is therefore the cube root of 64. Now I know this is bleeding obvious, but if they pointed this to me out in school, I wouldn't have had to spend so many years trying to wrap my head around it. Do you notice that I've used 6 here, but you can use any number? If you put 1 over it and multiply it by its square, you get the number. We have a scalar difference between the fraction and the whole number. When I use the word scalar, I mean difference in size, order of magnitude. Simple as that. Right, how much tax do you pay? Silly man. You should get out of Europe, yeah? How much tax do you pay? I've done this all of my life, and my clients always got it wrong. I mean, they are right, but when I point this out to them, and there's a simple example, you pay 25% tax, you pay 250 quid, but you've only ever got 750 in your pocket, didn't you? You didn't get that 1,000. They took the tax off you. Therefore, what they've got relative to what you've got is 1/3 of what you've got. Numbers, that's how they trick you. And it's simple. A factor is a number that divides exactly into a larger number. Exactly being the key word there. And as with factors contributing to divorce, global cooling and aging, there can often be more than one factor. And there's a list of numbers which are factors of 20. So that again is a simple arithmetical point I'm trying to make. Primes. A prime is a number with 2 and only 2 factors. And that is 1 and itself. It's indivisible by any other numbers. The prime number, pretty critical to what's coming up. Because at the University of Cambridge, you can watch this lecture. I'm not going to play it. It's about 20 odd minutes long, half an hour or so. And Dr. Vicky Neal is talking to her pupils at Cambridge about prime numbers and the great mystery. If you go to the YouTube, you can watch the many lectures on prime number theory, and this one happens to be given at Cambridge. What you'll find, though, is the standard questions that mathematicians have with prime numbers, and that's what I want you to get today, is the question, not the answers. What are the mathematicians looking for, and why? And basically, if you watch that video, this is what it amounts to. They're trying to find out if they go on forever, and that's prime number distribution. Do the prime numbers go on forever? Because it's been noticed that the occurrence of prime numbers, as you list all the numbers, reduces the further down the line of numbers you go. So, do they go on forever? Question 1. Is there a pattern to the distribution of prime numbers? Question 2. Fundamental. If there is, everything changes. That is what they're looking for. Is there a pattern? Has it ever been found? She also goes on to point out that the number 1 is not a prime number, and she explains in detail why 1 isn't considered to be a prime. And basically it amounts to this. Although 1 is only divisible by 1 and itself, and therefore qualifies under the rule of primes, which says an integer greater than 1 is called a prime number, blah blah blah. So she's just goes into quoting for 10 minutes what the basic rules are. To highlight once again, do they go on forever, and is there a pattern? And 1 is not a prime number under the laws of mathematics. Okay? The number 1 is a special number. It's more special than a prime according to our mathematicians because it's the unit, the building block. I always thought primus number, the first number, was the building block, but no, they've had to invent another one. They don't like calling 1 prime. And the reason for that is that their mathematics falls down entirely if 1 were to be a prime. Their equations wouldn't work. Their entire system fails if 1 were to be a prime. Therefore it can't be, can it? So 1 is the only... Oh, I'm not going to do that. She's into multiplicative identities and stuff. Well, we'll forget that bit. But the definition of a prime is as follows. It's an integer, that's a number, greater than 1, if only positive divisors, and that's factors, of 1 and itself. Clearly 1 is left out as a prime. Now, this was Dr. Vicky's prime distribution chart, and there you can see for the first time that she's laid out all the prime numbers for you. And she was debating how to do that. Does she do 3 columns, or 5, or 6, or what do you do? The numbers are infinite. How do you put them down to see if there's a pattern there? And she actually expresses to her pupils her surprise, because she had a pencil given to her by one of her pupils, and it had 6 sides on it, and those numbers, there were numbers, prime numbers, on that pencil. It's obviously a math head pencil in a university. She was spinning it round, and she kind of noticed something about the number 6, so she wondered what would happen if she put them in columns of 6. And as she has noticed, she pointed out, the prime numbers seem to occur around the number 6 and its multiples. Still hard to see on here though. See the column with 4 at the top? There's no primes there at all because it's divisible by 4, so there wouldn't be any primes in that column. This is confusing. She was inspired by her pencil to arrange the numbers in 6 columns as they were printed on the pencil. She couldn't state any rules other than primes come as twins, she's noticed. She then spends 20 minutes looking for other patterns and expresses the profound mystery of the primes. Their refusal to display any pattern, no matter how you arrange them, in lines, columns, or whatever. They are the building blocks, she says, of all other numbers. They are. It's a framework around which all other numbers are constructed. But you can't find a pattern in them. And that indeed is the goal of mathematics, prime number theory, and number theory generally. Why was she unaware and unable to tell her students what I'll show you throughout this talk? I've just been through this bit. This is what she was looking for. The pattern. Do they go on forever? Left turn into the number 6. 6 is called a perfect number, and it's the only number which is both the sum and the product of its factors. Alright, do you get that? 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6. 1 times 2 times 3 equals 6. There's no other number does that. Other perfect numbers will add, but never add and multiply. 6 is unique, alright? And if anyone's into occult stuff, you need to take note of the fact that 6 is a truly perfect number. Others I've listed there, like 28 is the next one. 496 is the next one after that. So there's not many of these perfect numbers anyway. And they're only additive. 6 multiplies and adds. Now, if you take 6 squared, we're talking about 36, and add up the numbers from 1 to 36, they come to 666. Worthy of note, what does it mean? Hopefully this will come together for you. I'm not going to try and put meanings to stuff. I want to show you stuff that will add meaning to what you know. Think of a chessboard. You've got 64 squares on a chessboard. Now, ancient chess was called Agi. I don't know how it was pronounced, but that was how it was spelled. And it had a goal. You had to win by surrounding the inner square. So, if you have a chessboard and you take the outer square, you're left with an inner square which has 36 in it, and that always represents 666 in occult terms when they're using numbers like this. So the whole point of that game was to take that grid in the middle. And in ancient chess, by the way, the king didn't concede. You know, in chess you just sort of checkmate somebody, yeah? You didn't in ancient chess. The white always won and the king was always killed at the end. Alright? What relevance has that got? This all ties into your royal elites and the numerology and so on. But I just thought I would mention chess. It's actually out of the Aggie board that you find your Freemasonic tracer boards. Everyone says it's a chessboard sort of thing. It's not. It's the... And the rules of that game were different to chess. And if anyone has made the link between chess and the Masons, I suggest you go and research Aggie, and you'll come to some realizations about the Masons beyond what you have already. So anyway, the goal was to win by surrounding those 666 units. Algebra is just a branch of mathematics that uses letters and other symbols to represent numbers, and it quantifies them as an equation. A formula is a mathematical rule expressed in symbols. So the formula for happiness, there you go, called happiness A. So happiness equals P plus 5E plus 3H, if P, E and H are those things there. That's all a formula is. Lots of people are put off by formula, me included. Sorry to patronise people with the maths lesson, but hopefully it'll come together for you. An Einstein quotation, probably one you've not come across, but if A is a success in life, then A equals X plus Y plus Z. Very true. The golden ratio, no doubt some of you will have come across this. It's a way, the ratio itself is a way of expressing a relationship between two different amounts. If you have 8 pairs of stilettos and 4 pairs of pumps, then the ratio is 2 to 1. The golden ratio, also known as the golden section or the divine proportion, is a significant number in maths and the arts, and it's written like that, and it's called phi. In fact, there it is. Interestingly pulled out of an old book about a comet that hit England. And there's some more in nature. But you've all come across phi, I guess, and there's the phi spiral. Again, some of the numbers involved in that you will see often. So coming to the Fibonacci sequence. You've all done this at school. I bet there was a time you could all say what the next numbers were, but how it drifts. It's a series of numbers in which each number is the sum of the 2 preceding numbers. And it's special because the ratio of each successive pair of numbers is phi. The more you go down the track of numbers, the closer it becomes to phi. It's homing in on that ratio. And interestingly, that's why they used it in the Eden Project as well. It's obviously in nature. And this is the first step, I think, of people who start looking at sacred geometry and the way that nature works and so on and so forth. They come across phi. And that's your introduction to sacred geometry normally. The next number in the sequence, what will it be? Can anyone tell me? Thank you. 144. So I'll just take that back. That's the initial sequence. The next one is 144 after so many steps. Now, 144 is an interesting number. It is the speed of light in arc seconds per second around a curved surface. And again, in occult numerology, when you see 144, it is generally referring to light. How many people will be saved in the rapture if you're a Christian? That's a coincidence. Oh, I don't know, mate, yeah. I'll get into that. But you're right, it was 144,000 people in the rapture. They believe that, well, you know that stuff. I think they're wrong. I think they've missed what their own books are telling them, but we'll get there. Notice also that in kilometers a second, it's 300,000. Every time they measure it, it gets closer to 300,000. But it's not. How do you measure the speed of light? Let's not worry too much about it. But that is the speed of light in meters per second. Oops. What I meant to do actually was use this for the first flipping time. Here we go. There it is. Look at that number. Can you see that? That's where the pyramid's built. Alright, now if you're a math head, to be technical, you could say, well, that's not true, because that point there, it could actually be down there on the pyramid. At no point is it like right in the middle. the point being that the pyramid encompasses that up to about all these decimal places. So that's pretty well built on a number which signifies to anyone in the know this encompasses the secrets of light. Or does it? Pi in the sky. Do you remember this one? How to calculate the area of a circle, etc. Again, don't need it as a maths lesson really, just to remind you. For anyone who doesn't know what pi is, no one knows what pi is really, but it is the function that links the diameter of a circle to its radius, etc., its circumference. That's a good way to remember it, by the way. If you don't know what pi is, how I wish I could calculate pi. You take the number of letters in each one, and that's pi. Okay? A bit more pi. There you go. The circumference of any circle is calculated by multiplying the length of the diameter by pi. Pi is the 16th letter of the Greek alphabet. And some think there's a reference to pi in the Book of Kings, the description of the building of the Temple of Solomon. It all goes back to the Temple of Solomon. They say it's slightly inaccurate because it's expressed as 3 in that scenario. And of course we know better today, it's 3.14, or do we? Yeah? In Kings, well, there it is. Also, he made a molten sea of 10 cubits from brim to brim. So basically, that's what's in the Book of Kings, which is where they get 3 for pi. The earliest record of pi was written by an Egyptian scribe around 1650 BCE on the Rind papyrus. And he wrote, "Cut off 1/9 of a diameter and construct a square upon the remainder." And this has the same area as a circle. So it seems like such a simple problem to draw a square that covers the same area as a circle using nothing but a straight edge and a compass. That's the squaring of the circle. That's what your freemasons, etc. will talk about. It's actually not attainable. This is why they seek the maths and the geometry to square the circle. How hard could it be? On the one hand, you have a circle, the simplest form in the universe. A raindrop in a pond produces perfect circles of waves that expand until cancelled by the friction of the shore. The branches of a tree, viewed from above, is a circle. Planets and stars try to form spheres in space. Well, unless you believe in the flat earth. Circles and... exits over there, by the way, if you do. Circles are everywhere in the natural world, and to the people of early civilizations, the great circles of the sun and the moon were sources of infinite power, looking down upon them every day. On the other hand, you have a square, exquisitely formed with 4 equal sides and 4 equal angles. And since the earliest recorded history, squares have been the opposite, the antithesis of the circle. The squares are found rarely in nature, maybe just in crystalline forms. Building a circle comes naturally with a piece of string or a straight edge. Anyone can do that. Building a square doesn't. You have to measure and calculate, and the simplest squares develop from circles. When 2 perpendicular lines are drawn through the centre of a circle, their ends form a square. So squares have become symbolic over the years of our ability to measure, to solve, and to partition. And when circles denote the infinite, squares denote the finite. Where circles reflect the mystery of the natural world, squares enabled early civilization to segment the land for farming and for ownership. And we'll be getting on to ownership of land later. We no longer live in circular hobbit homes, preferring instead the defined walls and angles of modern homes. But back to the problem. For 4,000 years of civilization, it has seemed natural that we as humans would be able to find a mathematical, geometrical relationship between the circle and the square, that we could measure the common circle as we measure squares or even triangles. And it's always seemed logical, paradoxically, that we could discover the limits to the infinite and could somehow calculate nature. But we were wrong. In our world of high-tech precision instruments, it's hard to admit that we can't truly solve a problem as simple as dividing a circle's circumference by its diameter. And yet this value pi has puzzled mathematicians for millennia, as you can never attain an exact value. And calculating pi is one of the hardest workouts even a top computer can do, if you didn't know that. The history of humankind is filled with drama, comedy and misfortune, and perhaps most of all, a peculiar attention to detail. Perhaps Miles van der Rohe was right when he said God is in the details, for mathematicians have plumbed deeper and deeper within pi's digits with a religious fervour, hoping to find even a hint of pattern or understanding. God ever geometrizes, said Plato. And yet, now that we've calculated billions of digits of pi and still found nothing, you've got to begin to ask, how detailed have we got to get before we start to appreciate the mystery of numbers? There's her chart again. Once again, no real pattern in there, although she was beginning to pick up on some. So here's your school test. I'll hand out bits of paper to you. I won't actually. So, a prime number, which one is it? Anyone? Who's going to be brave? Thank you, 2. No. Who said 2?
A number divisible by itself and 1.
Right, that's it. Okay. I thought I had a funny one on there. Now I missed it off. So, we were warned. This is skipping from one thing to another. I'll come back into each subject as we go along. We were warned. There are some whose ungenerous temper grudges men the boon of immortality and will not suffer them to get knowledge of that in them which is divine. For, speaking as a prophet speaks, I tell you that in after times none will pursue philosophy in singleness of heart, but there will be many who will make philosophy hard to understand and corrupt it with manifold speculations. In this way, by a cunning sort of study, philosophy will be mixed with diverse and unintelligible sciences such as arithmetic, music and geometry. I should say Asclepius was Corpus Hermetica, so does anyone, do you generally know about the Hermetica? Written hundreds of years ago, sort of arguably, we could debate this forever, but that's an ancient document. Now, Einstein taught himself mathematics. He didn't do maths before, he was just this geezer, but he taught himself maths, and the book he did it from, it's called Mathematics for the Million. It's called that on the basis that there's only ever going to be 1 million people on planet Earth who can understand it. Literally, that's why it's called that. Okay? But Einstein did, and he became a mathematical genius and came up with all sorts of stuff as a result, rightly or wrongly. So, what does it say about prime numbers? Well, it goes through everything, basically, that we've talked about already. It just defines prime numbers. But if you go to the book, I won't ruin it for you yet, it goes through this filter. There's this thing, I always pronounce this wrong, but a Rasputin sieve, yeah? You go back and find that. But this is an old technique for finding out what the prime numbers were. And you take all the numbers and you filter out the ones that aren't, and you're left with the ones that are. A big, long process. Ties computers up and all sorts. But there is the rulings, and it does say all those left are prime. Okay? So, going to the book, there it is. That's the end of it. All those left are prime. What can you see there? What's the first number on that list? What did we just decide earlier? Mathematics convention says 1 is not a prime. And that's the book that taught Einstein, and it says 1 is a prime. So you can debate this with mathematicians, and honestly the answer is no, it's not a prime, because if it were, our maths is wrong. Everything falls down. And that can't be, because look, it stands up to scrutiny. And yet, there it is. And prime number, first number, can you think of one that comes before 1 anyway? So my point is, don't let the math heads put you off. If 1 is a prime, it actually kind of changes stuff an awful lot. And all the mathematicians can ever do is say, it's not prime, it can't be. You're wrong, you're stupid. Interestingly, in that book, Magic Squares. Yeah, this is a mathematics book from, I think it's 1922 or something like that. Einstein learned maths from this. This is Magic Squares. the Kabbalistic use of the middle horizontal and vertical rows on this one concealing the name of Jehovah, Einstein's mathematics book, and this one over here, well, I'm doing something on John Dee later. Lots of things he drew. One of them looks just like that. Okay? You'll see. So that is the book that Einstein learned his numbers from anyway. I'll tell you a story about triangular numbers, all right? This is to do with magic squares. This shows you how different mathematics was as cultivated by the Pythagorean brotherhood from the math which Greek merchants used and came on to be our maths. In Lucian's dialogue, a merchant asks Pythagoras what he can teach him. "I'll teach you to count," says Pythagoras. "Well, I know that already," replies the merchant. "How do you count?" asked Pythagoras, and the merchant begins 1, 2, 3, 4. "Stop!" cries Pythagoras. "What you take to be 4 is 10, or a perfect triangle and our symbol." Seemingly the audience of Pythagoras wanted charades, and he gave them brighter and better charades each time. It was a short step to ceremonial prayers which his pupils offered to magic numbers. "Bless us, O divine number, who generatest gods and men, O holy tetractys, that containest the root and source of the eternally flowing creation." That's a Pythagorean prayer to the number 4. All right? Well, you know, why not pray to a number? You've seen what some people are praying to nowadays. Doubtless one circumstance which fostered the persistence of number magic in the ancient world was a very backward step which the Hebrews and later the mainland Greeks took. Now that line is taken out of that book. It's referring to the very backward step taken in the ancient world by the Hebrews. Do you think he was racist or anti-Semitic or something? I don't know. The priestly number scripts and those of the Phoenicians embody the repetitive principle, and as such they were lucid but too bulky to find favour with merchants and seamen. Both the Jews and the Greeks eventually settled for a much more economical way of recording numbers, i.e. the only criterion for economy is for the signs to occupy the minimum space on the writing surface. This is just business accounting. They conscripted every letter of the alphabet to represent a number, and represented numbers exclusively by such letters. Kabbalah. If the change was a thrifty one in one sense, it was anything but economical in another. It successfully stifled the impulse to enlist number signs in the service of ready computation. Another consequence is that it encouraged the species of magic called gematria, and gematria is the name for the quaint superstitions which arose in connection with the use of the alphabet, letters for numbers, of the Hebrews and Greeks. In those days, when men were first learning to use signs for numbers, they found themselves entangled in a bog of confusion by first attempts to invent symbols, which took up less space than the earlier hieroglyphic forms. When each letter came to represent a number, each word had its characteristic number formed by adding all the separate numbers represented by its letters. And when the number of the two words were the same, there were dark forebodings of hidden mysteries for hosts of commentators. And that's the way it is today. I don't know if anyone's into gematria or conspiracy studies of any sort, but you will constantly be being bombarded with things that have letter and number equivalents and being told that this means that, and this means that, well, whatever. I think you take the point. I hope you do. Einstein's general relativity field equation, we've taken you from 13-year-old arithmetic straight into Einstein's field equation. But I bet there's not many people in this room who won't be able to see through this. All you have here is all that blurb there. That just means the structure of space and time. That's what it means. So the structure of space and time equals, look at this, 8 times pi. times the gravitational constant. 8 pi. Remember, gravitational constant, we kind of know what that is. And it's all over the speed of light to the power 4. There's that power 4 again. And why would that be? If nothing can go faster than light, why on earth would you have a number that is the speed of light to the power 4? Anyway, that is what I want you to see. 8 pi g over c4. That's the fundamental of Einstein's field equation. The stress energy tensor is just the source of the gravitational field. They don't know what that is, so they call it a stress energy tensor. You don't need to know what it is because they don't. Just as the mass density is the source of such a field in Newtonian gravity. So think of this, because they don't know what it is. Think of whatever's creating gravity as a standing wave somewhere in creation. A shear force, a scalar force underlying everything. And notice also, if there was a mathematician in the audience tonight, he could have pulled me up there and said, that pi doesn't mean pi. Yeah? What it actually means is, it represents, amazingly, they don't know why, but it's the distribution of prime numbers in a circle of up to an infinite radius if you're doing it for the size of the universe. Some to do. But it means the same. It's representing a circle. 8 pi. E equals mc squared. His other famous one, well, his only really famous one. And there's a simple way to visualize what this means. It's geometry. It's a triangle. That's all that is. If you make one side of the triangle one length, another length, then the third side is set. So if you've got a triangle like that and adjust any one side and the other two will adjust accordingly, do you see what I mean? That's all that equation's saying. If they told you that in school, it might have made sense. If they'd said, hey man, E equals mc squared, look, actually reality is a triangle, man, and if you push it this way everything just changes and stays in line. You could have had more fun at school then. Change any one of these factors and the other two adjust relatively. That's all it's saying. There's nothing complex in that equation, and it doesn't actually pin anything down. And I'd go so far as to say it's wrong anyway, but we'll get to that. Cymatics. Who's heard of cymatics? A few people? It's, if you put sand on a metal plate and resonate that plate, you've seen this in pictures before, it'll take on a pattern, yeah? Cymatics is the pattern that's coming out of resonant fields. This one, a guy called Michael Tellinger, who's Africa, I think. Yeah, South Africa. Has been filming this in laboratories and so on. This happens to be the resonance of the Earth, the Schumann resonance, which is around 7 to 8 cycles per second. And that's what it looks like. So do take on board. Well, can I pick on some? I'll pick on you. How would you describe that? In what form is that? A what? A plug hole. See ya. Plug hole. Yeah, it's a plug hole. All right. So we'll run with plug hole.
You did ask.
I did, didn't I? So, the global electromagnetic resonance phenomena is named after Schumann, who predicted it mathematically in 1952. And the resonances occur because the space between the surface of the Earth and the conductive ionosphere acts as a closed waveguide. And the limited dimensions of the Earth cause this waveguide to act as a resonant cavity for electromagnetic waves in the extremely low frequency band. The cavity is normally excited by electric currents and lightning, and Schumann resonances are the principal background in the electromagnetic spectrum, beginning at 3 Hertz and extending up to 60. So that's kind of from can't hear it up until you can.
What's this got to do with 432? In music?
Oh, different thing. I'd have to come back to you in the break or something on that one, all right? This will go into music, if you see what I mean. I'll be getting to there. Yeah. I know where we're going, so thank you for that one. Can't answer your question. Yes, there we go. So 7.83 is actually the fundamental, but of course these things vary according to location. The chaos game, you can do this online. If you were to Google chaos game, you can actually see this happen now. And it shows how random iterations can produce perfection. So the idea of this is quite simple. Where's my pen? There it is. You start here and you roll the dice, a 3-sided dice. Okay, so it'll come up 1, 2 or 3. The first roll came up 2. That's why it's heading off in the direction of 2 on this example. Okay, but halfway between its starting point and where it's going, you must cut the line, throw the dice again, and obviously the next dice said 1, so you head in that direction, and now we're inside the triangle. From that moment, that will never come outside the triangle for obvious reasons, okay? But each dice roll, you move towards the number, but halfway there, you stop and roll again. And what that is doing is, imagine that that's a gas-filled cavity, and all of these, what would you call them? All the atoms of the gas are bouncing together randomly and chaotically within there. So if this atom of gas is heading over that way, statistically speaking, it'll only get halfway. Something will hit it and change its direction. So out of 3 points of chaos, you keep plotting those points halfway down each track. It's a hard one to describe or explain really, but basically by rolling a dice, 1, 2 or 3, you get that. Out of random dice throwing, albeit within 3 parameters, you get order. It's now, so this is an order out of chaos, because that's not chaos that you saw before. Oops. That's not chaos, that's just restricted order, as it were, random order up to 3. But it produces that only after about 3,000 iterations. That is defined as perfect order. So using a little trick like that, you have literally created perfect geometrical order. The Sierpinski triangle, which is that, was named after the guy who invented it, and the geometry of this form is conspicuous because of the first 8 lines. They make an equilateral triangle which repeats itself in a rhythm of 8 lines. The other conspicuous feature is it grows in size according to a defined pattern. This pattern is called fractal geometry. The first triangle consists of 36. Here, I'll just go, whoops, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. So it's talking about this thing here, oh sorry, the very first triangle at the top, all right, and then they increase in size as they come down. So it's saying here the first triangle consists of 36, that's 6 times 6 hexagons, and the hexagon has 6 sides. So that's a total internal angle of 720 degrees. There's 72, take note of that. Again, that's a number that keeps coming up in astrological terms. You could encode that knowledge as 666. That's my comment, not the author's, because you can encode lots of things as 666. Fractal geometry is defined by 3 numbers. Chaos, order out of chaos within 3 numbers, supposedly. And because the number 1 has not so far been recognized as the base number of all prime numbers of the form, 6n plus 1, forget that, I'll come back to that, they have never recognized the elementary cycle of 6 in the prime numbers. Dr. Vicky noticed it when she did her thing earlier, but she didn't make much of it. No doubt she'll be onto it now. So, coming up to music, there are 2 laws of nature. I don't teach this to you as someone who's saying, this is what I think. I'm just telling you, this is right. Whatever you think at the minute, please go out and shoot this down, okay? You'll find that this is right. There are 3 forces, and they are attraction, repulsion, and time. And they manifest with any phenomena to combine and generate all of nature's processes. If you see a cessation of movement, it simply means that the 3rd force is not there. There's always a passive or negative force, an active or positive force, and a neutral force. And all matter conducts three forces. They're protons, neutrons, and electrons. Thus, in a higher state, all living organisms are composed of three orders of energy and form: matter in electronic, molecular, and cellular states. And just look at the world around you and you see tripart allegiances in everything except EU referendum results. There are three types of number: rational, irrational, and transcendental. And take note of the numbers 1, 2, and 3 themselves, because all numbers are made out of 1, 2, and 3. There's not a number you can't that you could think of that isn't made out of them some way or other. They make for primes. So, the law of 7-part formation, and this is the octave law, and we'll be coming up to break in just a couple of minutes, so this would be a good point after this to leave it. To understand this concept, you've got to regard the universe as a dynamic entity consisting of untold degrees of resonance, which proceed in all kinds of densities of matter. It's a vibrational universe, that's what it's saying. And they're generated by the forces controlled by the first law, and then they proceed to collide, deflect, increase, etc. And all such degrees of resonance are always inwardly composed and transmute one to the other in 7-fold patterns of formation and sequence. And no element has ever been found to have more than 7 circuitry electron periods. So, what am I saying? Reality is musically based. All right? There's the first fundamental 3 aspects to it, and then everything evolves over an octave formation. You might have heard this from the odd philosopher in the past. I think it was only Ouspensky or someone. Not very many people talked about this. And they really need to, because this is being discovered to be the way that the world works. The prime numbers, anyone a musician in here? Yeah? You'll probably agree prime numbers are what make music. Yeah. Music is made out of prime numbers. That's why we have music. That's why music feels good, because it's based around the primes and the divisions of the primes. And so are we, and so is everything, which is why music kind of vibes with you sometimes. So just remember those laws, the triple creation and the law of octaves. 7 and 8 both mean octave. There's 8 notes in an octave, but the last one is the same as the first, so you've got 7 genuine notes, and the 8th one is the octave above. Does anyone not understand that? Because there is the Hermetic code. What this is a model of 3 octaves, the 3 times the octave. That is how all things work. In a triple octave, there are 24 notes. 3 times 8, 24. Right? The magical number of the Egyptians, their magical number. But where people fall down or don't get this in this kind of study is that 24 is also 22, for simple reason that if you put 3 octaves together, as any musician will tell you, you start with, let's call it Do, all right? Re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, that's 7 notes. And the next note of the octave is a Do. So you're back from A to A, or B to B, whatever. Then you do it again. But these 2 are shared. Okay? In a triple octave, this is the first and the last. Okay? This represents the first in that octave and the last in that octave. He could say, I am the first and the last. So could he. And I think, subject to the next slide, that might be a good place to leave it, because there's not much in the way of maths after this. This was a boring maths lesson, and we'll get into some interesting stuff, I hope, with the tetrad after. Cup of tea now, is that what you want to do? Yep. Cheers. Well, we'll knock on with this. Lots to get through. Sorry for the boring maths lessons, or arithmetic lesson earlier. Pressing on, we have the tetrad. This is the Egyptian, it was Egyptian, the Greek tetrad, the Egyptian tetrad. Michael Hayes, great book, The Infinite Harmony. I've got a book list here. I'll be dishing it out later. I don't have enough for everyone, but we can sort that. It's important to understand that to the ancients, versed in Pythagorean and Essene mysticism, numbers themselves, like the symbols of sacred art, of geometry, were regarded as entities in their own right. Are regarded as entities in their own right, and each was possessed with its own distinct individuality. 10. The esoteric symbol of the tetrad was regarded as the perfect number because it is the sum of the numbers 1 to 4. And 1 to 4 are the base notes of creation. If you can imagine creation being a musical suite, the first 4 numbers is what creates all of the notes in that creation. 64 is the maximum number of ways, and note that that is 4 to the power 3, in which 4 nitrogenous bases can combine into triplet units, so that's 4 into 3, called RNA codons, which in turn correspond to 22 amino acids. That's your triple octave that you saw before, 24 becoming 22 because of the overlapping notes. Basically what it's doing here is mapping onto the amino acids and DNA. The same structure is there and it is observable. So there are 64 biochemical signals on the inanimate side of the genetic code and 22 signals on the animate side. Words, time and numbers. Right, Kabbalah has a numerological preoccupation with angels. In the Sephiroth, the 10 most common names of God which make up his one great name. And these angels exist at the top, divine level of Kabbalah's 3-tiered universe. And the structure is reflected in the Hebrew language itself, in the 3 parts of the Hebrew speech, and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Dr. John Dee believed that an analysis of Hebrew was a way of discovering the structure that underlay God's creation. I wonder what made him think that. This was one of the greatest mathematicians ever. The laws of nature, according to him, were its grammar, and the stuff of physical reality, its nouns. The 24-hour clock was invented by the Egyptians, curiously, in the place where, for the very first time, humans calculated using the decimal system, base 10. And their hieroglyphic alphabet consisted of 24 letters. It was purely consonantal. Yeah, because the number of signs were expanded by the addition of signs for syllables and words, it's difficult to find an Egyptologist today who is even aware that every work in ancient Egyptian can be written with these 24 letters. And they guarded the secret of correlation between the numbers 24 and 6, which they considered to be sacred. The story of creation in 6 days has its origins in this notion. The Pythagorean comma, or kick. The Chinese observed that the circle of fifths was imperfect. Any musicians might know what I'm on about there. This means that practical music based on the harmonic series can never be played at optimum frequencies because there's natural discrepancies always present. And Pythagoras calculated this precise difference, and it was known as the Pythagorean comma. It's concerned with notes which are absolutely harmonious in nature. The uneven periods of development between the fundamental notes of a major scale thus give an exact picture in musical terms of the mode of progression through space and time of all natural phenomena, great, small, material, or otherwise. You might have seen the Vesica Piscis before. I just point out that bit in the middle there, that's a root 3. They use the square root of 3 to get that. So when you see the Vesica Piscis, it's saying root 3 to you, all right? If you're trying to decode what they're telling you. That, incidentally, is a real picture. That wasn't put in the middle there. That was a NASA picture. But again, you see... Sorry, this, of course, is the Christian ichthus. The fish came from this. So going back to Corpus Hermeticum. So the Hermetica says that God is in all things at their root and source. There's the word root again. There's nothing that has not a source, but the source itself springs from nothing but itself. Yeah? They're talking about prime numbers there. If it is the source of all else, God then is like the unit of number, for the unit, being the source of all numbers and the root of them all, contains every number within itself and is contained by none of them. It generates every number and is generated by no other number. Now everything that is generated is incomplete and divisible and subject to increase and decrease, but that which is complete is subject to none of these things. So the Pythagorean kick is a detuning. It's how notes detune in a three-dimensional reality. It can never be perfect, but it can. If you do the right thing, you can tune it at the right moment and it will transcend to the next octave. So when it's saying there, but that which is complete is subject to none of these things, it's referring to a fully harmonious octave of progression. That could be musical, that could be life, that could be a project you're working on, it could be anything and everything you can or ever will think of. For this is the number system that your mind and reality works with. Again, Asclepius warns from Hermetica. I won't read all that out, but he's basically going on to tell you that in times to come you will be misled by cunning sophists. Right? For to worship God in thought and spirit with singleness of heart, to revere God in all his works, and to give thanks to God, whose will is wholly filled with goodness. This is philosophy unsullied by intrusive cravings for unprofitable knowledge. There's kind of a key point. There's a lot of useless knowledge being bandied about, such as the meaning of the number 23 I had before. Someone was talking to me about, or it could be 44 or 16. There's always 1,000 lunatics willing to assign their own meanings to any given number, and 100,000 willing to listen to them. Asclepius warned. Well, I told you that one earlier, actually. I'll move on. Sorry. There we go. This one. You've all heard that one, perhaps, in the Bible. In the Book of Wisdom, 11:20. But thou hast arranged all things by measure and number and weight. And this is the Corpus Hermetica, talking about the signals of Thoth. Now, Thoth is the character called Hermes, Hermetica. Also, oh dearie me, so many people. Enoch, right? Enoch and Thoth and Hermes, and arguably one or two other characters are all the same. Mighty and strange they, veiled with their power, silent, all-knowing. Have I got it on here? Yes. Drawing the life force, different yet one with the children of men. Aye, different and yet one with the children of light. Custodians and watchers of the force of man's bondage, ready to loose when the light has been reached. First and most mighty sits the veiled presence, Lord of lords, the infinite nine, over the other, from each the lords of the cycles, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, each with his mission, each with his power, guiding, directing the destiny of man. There they sit, mighty and potent, free of all time and space. Talking of numbers as gods, which Newton did as well. There's something for you. That's the prime number cross. The lecturer at the university that I referred to earlier could not find any pattern in the prime numbers. None of them can. Whereas if you do what the Egyptians told you and turn it into a 24-hour day and do 6 of them, this is the 6 days of creation that you'll find Francis Bacon writing about, then you have the prime number cross.
Cross of the Templars.
You can put any number. This is infinite. Those circles go on forever. But what I want to show you here, on a slightly better version. Lisa, are you there? I've got lights on my face. There's some copies of this coming around. So you've got copies of this coming around. So you've got one in front of you as I move on, if you ever want to refer to it. But what this is the prime number cross. So, They have been hunting for a pattern in prime numbers for centuries and can't find it, but they have come across some, like they see that primes occur around multiples of the number 6. Did anyone know that? All prime numbers occur around multiples of the number 6. That's the only place you'll ever find them. And there are no exceptions. Some numbers that appear around multiples of the number 6 are not primes, but they will be the square of previous primes. Right. So all prime numbers come as twins either side of the number 6 or any multiple of it. So by putting the numbers in circles, and here, this is where it starts. See the 24 there? So this is literally just a 24-hour clock in the middle, all right? That's nothing more than a 24-hour clock. By putting the numbers around instead of in a straight line, so you go 1 to 24, and when you get to 24, you start another circle above it with 24. You don't go to 25, you go to 24. And you go on the next circle, and you do exactly the same. And doing it that way, all of these here are the primes, and they lie on 8 rays, only 8 rays. Anyone into esoteric philosophy will have come across the 8 rays in many different forms, I'm sure. The 8 rays of creation being one of the names given sometimes. Here, before your very eyes, I mean, it's hard to actually describe this to you. Before your very eyes is the answer to what that physicist has been looking for, that mathematician, earlier. And all of them. Now you might be thinking, well, if that were true, they'd all be in here saying, hey, we found it. Well, you need to get over that. Yeah? You can show them this, and it either does their head in or does their career in. There tends to be nothing in the middle. It's so simple that they missed it. And yet every esoteric philosophy told them what to do. Put the numbers in a circle, 24, the magic number of the Egyptians. This is their math. Okay? And it's no coincidence. Well, is it a coincidence that it actually comes out looking like the cross of the Knights Templar? Okay? What is a Templar? What does temp mean? They're the Knights of Time. That's who your Templars are. The temple, the original Temple of Jerusalem is the Temple of Time. Now, who is the symbol of time in esoteric philosophy? Thank you. Okay, so start making these links. The Freemasons obviously tied up with all of this kind of thing. And if you went and spoke to a high-level Freemason, I'm not suggesting they'd know this stuff. They've been looking for this stuff. Okay, that's what the secret societies have been doing. I've got papers here which give the location of the original Temple of Jerusalem. And that was you'll have heard of this one, that was the Priory of Zion, their papers, tracking and giving the grid references of the Temple of Jerusalem. Why would they want to do that, you might be asking? Well, if you saw the grid references, you'd know it's Jerusalem, it's Edinburgh. Okay? Now, profound suggestion, don't believe me, but do. You need to. I'll get back to that, more about that actually, because what I'm suggesting as I go on here is that the Bible, what you read in the Bible, yes, it's encoded. Yes, certainly the King James Version is encoded beyond belief. That's what it is. But what are they encoding in it? Is it the secrets of a science of a lost civilization? Clearly, that's what this is, by the way. But we'll get to that. What is it that these people have been looking for? And how can you have scientists standing in front of their students telling them that they can't find a pattern in prime numbers when you personally could go and give them that now? All right, if you had the balls. It takes some balls. Trust me. Try it.
Did you say it's also the sign for nuclear radiation?
It's. I'll be getting into CERN on the back of this. I'll tell you what I think CERN is because of this. this defines a science which tells me what CERN is. Doesn't mean I'm right, but I bet I am, if you see what I mean. And this is what I want to get over to you, because I'll say this sometimes. This is right, yeah? Now, you'll be sat there thinking, we can't prove it's right. Well, my point to you is, you can go home, you can prove this. This is there. And I've shown you tonight, they cannot find a pattern in prime numbers anywhere. Yes, if you put them in a circle, the patterns come out. They exist around every multiple of a number 6. They exist on 8 rays only, and those rays belong to particular categories. You'll see that you've got primes, they're the 8 rays. The other rays are divisible by 2, divisible by 3. That's all they are. All numbers are divisible by 1, 2, or 3. So you have a simple breakdown of all numbers in existence there, and lo and behold, there's a pattern which extends as far as you can take it. Okay? That is the solution that they're looking for. So, what I can't do is prove that to you, but you can, in 10 minutes of your own time, just go around and you've got the pattern there of all the prime numbers. But it gets a little bit more profound than that, because what you have there is the structure of creation, reality itself, how it forms, and then how it evolves once it has been created, and it evolves around the 8 rays. These rays create the octave forms we were talking about before, the notes of the octave. This is just a picture. If in reality, if you were God and you wanted to use these things to create some kind of creation, you take one of those, each of those numbers would have a specific frequency, and you would you'd interlock 2 like that, all right? So when you see that, you need to think of 2 of them actually interlocked and spinning on both axes. And if you can imagine that, you've unlocked all of the physics equations we looked at earlier too. I'll show you a picture shortly. Yes, intersecting like that. So that's the prime number cross. We'll be coming back to that in many ways, but that is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And I'm sorry it's not 42, all right? But you will find 42 in there.
It will equate to 42 at some stage.
Yeah, it will. It all adds up to 42.
Yeah, what were those 2 highlighted?
What was that?
19 and 81 highlighted.
Yes, well, all right, 81. The number 81, crikey, how do you do this? If you can imagine, yes, this is a recipe for the universe and creation, okay? And it's based on the stream of numbers that we use, 1, 2, 3, 4, into infinity. Yeah? Wrap them in a 24-hour circle or 24 circle, you get the structure of the universe. This then maps on to all the chemical elements. You can go by atomic weight of the chemical elements and find that they actually map in exactly the same way. This has been done. Yeah? Well, last time I talked about this, it hadn't. I said, it's possible. I know it's possible. It's there. Do it. And people have done it, and there it is. I'll show you later. Sorry, you had a specific question. What did you say then?
Like the 19 and
81, that was it.
Why are they highlighted?
81. Right, notice they add up to 100, all right? 19 is what you got left when you take 81 from 100. Dealing with the 81, the number 81, if you reciprocate it, 1 over 81 gives you 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, forever. It defines the decimal system, okay? 81, a way of, this is my words, but the way I think of this is that here we have a model of 4-dimensional reality, and time is not one of those dimensions. It's 4 physical dimensions we'll be looking at. Obviously we are aware of 3 of them, and there's an intersection point where the 4 becomes 3, in exactly the same way as the number 4 incorporates the number 3. It will be the same system. And 81 is the pivot point where 4 dimensions becomes 3-dimensional. All right? If you can think of it as in that concept. I'll get back to 81. 81 is a unifying number that actually proves all of this out. So keep your eye on those two numbers. 19 is the number of the Quran, by the way. It's mentioned 19 times in the Quran for quite a specific reason. 19 is the number of the Quran. It's also the number of the moon according to the Quran. Okay, for anyone who's delving into that. Yes, you are out there, Jerry. Jerry McLaughlin has done some lovely, I nearly use the word paintings, but these are collages, aren't they? Or certainly two of them are. Well, if anyone wants painting, she's done commissioned paintings and so on of the prime number cross. Tried to encourage people to do this a couple of years ago because no one's ever done this. If I was an artist, I'd want to do it. No one's ever done it. Well, Jerry has, and there she is if you ever want one from her. If she doesn't run away. And thank you for mine. Is Lisa there? Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to you for all the help you've given me even getting here. And Lisa ran my show, the Pierrots and Fools show, on her radio station. Probably regret it forever, but there you go. She will after the next episode anyway. Right, here we are. The Book of Revelation. Now there's a Templar Bible was found in Germany, and this is the translation from that, not your King James version. In the centre, have you got your pictures in front of you? You look at your pictures while I read this to you, all right? In the centre was the One, the unnameable, surrounded by 4 powerful things. And around the throne were the 24 chairs, with the 24 elders, and they prayed to the unnameable. Through you alone all things and all beings exist. Your will enabled them to be and gave them form. Around the throne, around the 4 powerful beings, and around the elders there were 10,000 times 10,000, and again 1,000 times, and again 1,000 angels. We'll get to that bit. But there you have your 4 powerful beings surrounded by your 24 things. Just an interesting correspondence. Back to the prime number cross. This is actually as Peter Plichter himself defined it in his book. I can't do German, but that means prime number cross. So I do recommend you get that book. It is on the reading list together with about 200 others, but I just thought people might want references to some books on these subjects.
That's like the system of CERN, where the sensors go to detect the particles.
Is it?
Yeah. It's on a massive sensor like that, and they have them along certain lines that are pretty much aligned up along.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if anyone knows this stuff, CERN do. This has to be kept secret because this unlocks science that you know what you can do with science, don't you? I believe this is what brought the Twin Towers down. A weapon based on this brought the Twin Towers down. And I'll touch on that. This, to me, defines a specific technology which you can actually see all around you today. This is kind of where I was going before. The geometry of the prime number cross is what they call x squared, y squared geometry. And that's a picture of it. It's two-dimensional planes intersecting. Simple. So that is your universe. And what it's suggesting is that that's a terrible little picture. I'm not very good at graphics, but we live there. There's reality on the intersection of the two-dimensional planes. Okay? These angles here don't have to be 90 degrees. In fact, they are quite specifically designated through esoteric writings in the past, how these planes of our reality intersect and at what angle. But I won't go there yet. Peter Plichter has found the prime number cross. The prime number cross proves to be the order of the primes, which orders music and everything else in creation. This unifies all the natural sciences, mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, you name it. It unifies onto the prime number cross. You need to go and put your heads around that to pursue it for yourselves. I'm just telling you where you're going to end up. There's not a mathematician, physicist, chemist, anyone has ever come back and challenged this. They can't. They will say rubbish. Not looking at that. You know, I've spent 50 years. Don't be stupid. What do you know? Metaphysics, they'll say. Yeah. Nevertheless, there it is. And I can read out some of the comments of some scientists about Plichter himself, which I will do later on. Anyway, there you go. X squared, Y squared geometry. 2 intersecting planes. That's the geometry of the prime number cross. What happens if you make a mirror shaped like that? Now, I was going to bring it, but it's really heavy. It's called the space mirror, and it literally is like... Do you see how I've got it? That here, that's the mirror there, okay? Just 2 mirrors there, joined at 90. Unfortunately, there's a line. If we could do this perfectly, there'd be no lines. I'm going to try and get one engineered, so there is no connecting line there to break up the image. But that's it. That is the space mirror. Now, if you were to sit in front of that and meditate, I can tell you that whatever you might be thinking about can and will materialize if you put enough effort into it for any onlooker. That's weird, yeah? And you have a top scientist mathematician saying that as well. He's done it. I've done it. Others have. It doesn't work every time. It's like any meditation. But what you are doing is sitting in front of a mirror that is shaped like the universe is itself. The geometry is the same as your mind. It's the same as everything that you are and everything that everything is. And when you look in that mirror, you see yourself for the first time in your life as others see you, because it doesn't reverse your image. If you were to shake hands with yourself in that mirror, that hand would come out and shake hands with you, not the opposite. Okay?
It's interesting how the crescent is on the same side in all images.
That's just my crystal ball I put there because it made a pretty picture. I didn't actually take this picture to illustrate the mirror, but yeah, you're right. That's why I liked it. But there is the mirror, and of course, to get it strictly right, you would have to make the mirror like that. All right, so you've got 4 sides. You can have 4 people sitting in it and looking in it. But there's a real one. And, well, during Queen Elizabeth's first visit to John Dee's home, Dr. John Dee, in 1558, I think, he recorded that he brought out the magical mirror, which was given to him by Sir John Pickering, which, to Her Majesty's great contentment and delight, he demonstrated to her. There's various passages then explain what I pointed out to you before. She was shocked that when she lurched at the mirror, her hand lurched back at her. All right? If you lurch at any mirror, it's the other hand, isn't it, that's doing everything's reversed. This wasn't, and so they were as shocked and amused and so on. So, logic tells me it has to be a mirror shaped like the one I've just shown you for it to do that. That's the only mirror that could do that. And he called it the magic mirror. So she was marvelling over that. It is x squared y squared geometry, and we'll get back to John Dee. Now, I was talking to a minister before, minister of a church, and we're talking about communicating with the angels and the demons. You might be aware some people do this and others don't, and some don't believe it and others think it's mad and so on, but each to their own. Because one of the greatest mathematicians and scientists in history believed it and did full research into it and documented it all. My point being that I don't think you have to be an occultist, and I think this minister out there, I can't see anyone because the light's in my face, but would agree from what he said. You can do this yourself, right, if you need to or want to. It's nothing that your religious types actually own for themselves. They try to keep you away from it, though, and make you scared of it, because you might learn something. Anyway, long story short, I asked Dr. John Dee, as I did this as an experiment. I don't do this. I did this as an experiment to prove something. And basically I got in using prime numbers, none of their long drawn out ceremonies or anything. And rather amusingly asked for rhyming couplets that might help me with this, to give me something that I haven't got. Yeah? So don't believe this, I'm just telling you what happened. And this is what came out. Pi to 4 is the key, I is to pi, I is to pi as pi is to 4. I've missed out my as there, but whatever. On a spiral of primes, you can open a door. And I was rhyming couplets at the time, doing some other stuff, so it was all fairly humorous. Pi 4, ratio pi to 4. Didn't mean to press that button. Is the key, he says. Might be. I believe it is. What I haven't been able to do is do the rest. I is to pi as pi is to 4. Now, anyone who's into maths can see why that's not actually mathematically sound in any way. But I'm telling you, actually, don't think about the maths. Think about what I is. Remember, I square root of minus 1. You can't have it. Well, who says? Who says? What if you can? That's when you'll find out that that actually makes sense, which I'm working on at the minute. But that certain individuals do see visions, and specifically hypnagogic images when gazing into a transparent glass or reflective surface, can be regarded as an item of psychological knowledge. It's known, it's not disputed. Jesus scribed the future. Did you know that? It was part of his religion. So why wouldn't Dr. John Dee, who was a great Christian? In the Bible, it does refer to a silver cup, which was used by Jesus for divining the future and its theft and the trouble that it caused. And when they were gone out of the city, blah, blah, blah. There's one quote. There are a few other quotes about Jesus using it as a source of divination. And indeed, from my perspective, that's exactly what he'd be doing. All this occult stuff came from the original Jerusalem church. It's just a matter of record anyway. Dee found political authority for the British Empire in the accounts of King Arthur and Owen Madoc, a legendary Welsh prince said to have discovered America in 1170. Yes, it is that one, isn't it? And to compete with the spiritual authority of Rome. However, he sought divine authority from the angels and God himself. The angels told him what he wanted to hear, that much is clear. The world begins with thy doings, they said to him. Thus, his scrying, publications and political activities were all part of his grand scheme to unify the peoples, the religions and the languages of the world through universal knowledge. They were his own words, that's what he was trying to do. An element of this plan was, he said, to convert the pagans of the New World and the Jews out of their rather misguided perception and numbers and stuff which I referred to before. And the key messages of the angels to him were here, that flesh is vile and corrupt, mercy for the repentant is necessary, temptation of the faithful is necessary in order to show God's mercy, the imminent coming of the Antichrist, the imminent fall of existing political and religious establishments as punishment for mankind's corruption, to be replaced by new righteous ones. Does this ring a bell? Right, space, time. Peter Plichter, author of the Prime Number Cross, he didn't make it, he found it. It's there. That's the point. It's not a discovery, it's just there. When you wrap them around in circles. Space around an atomic nucleus contains the dimension 2 to the power 4. I had expected the Prime Number Cross to be somehow connected with matter. It is not only somehow connected with matter, but each individual atom contains the information and structure of prime number space. Blah, blah, blah. There's some stuff there to get through, and hopefully when this comes out you can spend more time going through some of these individual things. The interlocked tetrahedra. Anyone into tetrahedral physics? What they found on the surface of Mars and stuff? Tetrahedral physics. There you go. Star of David, 2 interlocked tetrahedra. Yes. As is pointed out there, you get Saturn actually has a that shape on one of its poles. The interlocked tetrahedra has been found to be key to torsion physics and the dynamics of scalar standing waves. Reminding you once again that 6 is 1 times 2 times 3, and that 6 is therefore the scaffold on which all prime numbers are constructed, whose distribution appears arbitrary when viewed in the conventional way, and they are solely and exclusively a result of the structure of the number plus and minus 1 and the number 6. What it's saying there, if you look at your sheets, you get to any multiple of 6 and the primes will be plus 1 or minus 1 around that. That's it. Reality is a function, a plus 1, minus 1 function around 0, around multiples of prime numbers. And here is where all the natural sciences unify. Because once you accept that primes exist around every multiple of the number 6, you then have to stop and think, because you have some primes down the bottom, 2 and 3, for example. 2 is the only even prime, worthy of note. What about them? Why does the rule start at 6? Does it not come down to 0? It would have to if we're suggesting that 1 is a prime. And of course the answer is quite simple. 0 times 6 is a multiple of 6, isn't it? And therefore minus 1 and plus 1 are prime numbers. Take it that way, and all of the sciences merge and unify into a simple arithmetical system, which is, and I must point this out in case it's missed or you've missed it, this is nothing more than the numbers you were taught to count with as a 2-year-old. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's it. Find the order in there. That's creation. This is mathematics, this is physics. And it's quite scary, because they come as twins. Jesus had a twin, yeah? He was called Thomas. According to some accounts, there's always this reference to twins throughout history. Plichter goes on to point out that on the prime number cross itself, you see those circles? Well, the first circle sums up to 300. The numbers 1 to 24 sum up to 300. On the second circle, they sum up to 900. On the third circle, it's 15, and on the fourth, it's 21, etc. What's happening there is, if you look at the expansions, they're actually expanding by a factor of 1, 3, 5, 7. They're going up according to the multiples of the uneven numbers. So each circle has a defined number on it, which increases each step of the way according to the uneven numbers. So the next one would be 9 times 300. Do you see? And the next one would be 10, and so on. If you add up all of the numbers on the first 6 circles, if you wanted to take it literally and say, well, if this one circle is 24, and you call that a day, which they allude to that, what happens after 6 days? What do you think they all add up to if you add up the first 6 circles? Can anyone guess? It's the 144,000. Okay? So the first 6 days of creation in this little model come to the speed of light. And did they not say, it's all about light, cracking the code of light? Anyway, if you're not convinced yet, the 4 prime twins of the first shell determine the structure of all other shells, and they demand a 0 shell on which only the numbers 1 and minus 1 are located. It had formerly been a complete mystery as to why the atomic shells have to have a lower shell on which only 2 electrons are located. That's why. And because infinity has a triple nature, space, time and number, the numbers themselves evolve on the basis of the first 3 numbers, and the basic constant of the prime number cross is the number 3. The expansion constant of light must also be 3. what he's saying here is he's discovered an error in the reasoning which we make when we speak of the speed of light. And it's so hard to put into words, but think of it this way. How far away is the moon? You're trying to work out the speed of light. So you might send a beam to the moon and bounce it back and measure the time, yeah? The very process of doing that, introducing distance into a calculation, gives a time result, doesn't it? To cover distance must have time. What he's saying is that's nonsense. Light has no speed. It's an expansion factor of 3. Simple. That's a hard concept to get your head around, but light has no speed, which might be why they keep finding it's varying. It certainly has a constant 144,000 arc seconds per second. That will always be constant. But the actual speed in miles per hour or whatever, they're still struggling to find. And how do you measure that? It's merging on 300,000 kilometers a second. The day that happens, even modern physics will have proven that this bloke is right. But it already has, that's the point. It's just they don't like it because they missed it. And a 6-year-old could have seen it, had that 6-year-old been shown. The space mirror. In Timaeus, Plato describes a reflective surface consisting of 2 mirrors at right angles, and such a mirror reverses its image in space and always gives 3 reflections. From the center of the mirror, space is broken up at right angles into 4 quadrants. And because infinite prime number space exists around every point, this space has a strange angular dimensional geometry of intersecting planes. These intersecting planes are demonstrated by Plato's mirror. So this mirror effectively makes it possible to see hidden phenomena such as a mental picture. Do try it sometime. Make sure there's no one of a nervous disposition around, and make sure you're thinking of something half decent when you do it. Yeah. So this notion of 4 dimensions has nothing to do with the popular combination of 3 dimensions and time at all. It's 4 spatial dimensions. Time is something else altogether, which we won't touch on, and neither does he, but I've got that bit too, I think. Moving on, because there is lots. Just as an insect has no comprehension of the 3rd dimension, humans are unable to comprehend the 4th. And this scientist points out that that's actually why a fly doesn't fall off of a ceiling. It doesn't comprehend that other dimension. It's not subject to it. It doesn't have sticky pads on its feet or anything like that. He noticed that the cross that he was observing looks like the cross of the Order of St. John, the Christian Knights, the Knights Templar, basically. He also says that because there are 2 forms of space, so he's talking about prime number space and reciprocal prime number space. As above, so below. The whole numbers expand to infinity. The fractions expand downwards to infinity. But you can combine all of those fractions in infinite number of fractions between 2 whole numbers. They all exist between 1 and 2. You can add them up and they'll never exceed that. And therefore, you have an infinite stream of numbers bounded by 2 others. You've just bounded infinity. You've just become a god if you've done that, haven't you? But that's how to bound infinity mathematically. Reciprocate it. They know this. This is where Hermetica meets prime numbers. The existence of all things that are would have been impossible if space had not existed as an antecedent condition for their being. If anything is to exist, space must be provided beforehand. That's what Hermetica says. Plichter has just shown 4-dimensional space, in contrast to 3D space, requires by its very nature points of finite size. Particles did not emerge at some time in the past, but instead exist because of the nature of infinity, the prime number structure of space. I'm going to skip through a lot of this because this is actually going into the chemistry side of it, and we will run out of time if we go there. So what? The revelation of a universal plan will force scientists and theologians to review their dogmatic vanity and give every lay person the chance to inquire into the matter, whatever degree they like. Each individual will thus be able to declare his or her independence of self-appointed authority. And this will logically lead to individual responsibility and freedom. Who built the moon? You come across that one before? Because no one was present to form these spheres with his hands. So remember I showed you earlier, the moon is actually 2732 is the linking number there. And I haven't gone into that stuff, I've done that in other talks, but that 2732 number comes out. I shall move on. He's saying that the universe is intelligent. Another quote from Asclepius on evil, but again I'll move on because I've got some good stuff here somewhere. Here's the moon stuff. Absolute zero is minus 273.2 degrees, okay? Sidereal month is 27.32 days. The ratio of the corner cap of a square to a circle is 0.2732. And all that means, I say all, this is huge in terms of sacred geometry. If that's a square there and there was a circle inside it, yeah? Up here, there'd be a corner flap left on the square, do you see? And down here. It wouldn't fill the corners. If you fold those corners over, they're 2732, 27.32% of the rest of the feature. The orbit around the sun, 366 days. If you stand off the planet, that's what it is. And there again, 1/366 is 2732. The reciprocal geometric lock of planet Earth and the moon is 1/2732. It's locked in a reciprocal number lock. Who did that? Is that natural? Statistical human gestation period, 273.2 days. Ratio of pi to 4, 1.2732. Moon's acceleration relative to Earth, 0.273. Radius of the moon, 0.273 relative to Earth. Megalithic yard, 2.732 feet. Are you seeing this? Am I making this up? Gas expands by 273.2, etc. And there it is all in graphic form. Spooky coincidences, do you think? Reverse speech. Is it magic that some phrases, when spoken backwards, sound phonetically like something? Is it magic? Is this the devil at work? Because I can see YouTube videos every day with people telling me this or showing how this sounds like something in reverse. That's a phonetic palindrome. Famous one, Lee Harvey Oswald, I want to kill president, was apparently what it said when they reversed and fair play for Cuba. And it does, but that's the point. In fact, you've probably got it on your phones. There's an app that does this for you now. It reverses your speech. We have apophenia, the perception of patterns in information. Pareidolia, the seeing or hearing of things which weren't meant to be there. This is in random objects. Confirmation bias, selection bias, or the law of near enough. Hey, I've applied the law of near enough here on this one. There. That's near enough to 0.2732, don't you think? That's the law of near enough. And I bet the 2's there anyway, they just haven't really done the measurements. So this number is everywhere. Littlewood's law, given the number of hours that we are awake every day, and assuming that an event takes place, only 1 second to take place, which they do. I got a call before about my daughter who fell over and she's in hospital 2 seconds later. Well, no, the ambulance wasn't that quick, but you get my point. So, if you can calculate the odds of any particular event happening to be, let's say, 1 in a million, you should expect that thing to happen to you every 35 days. The A1 in Newcastle caved in yesterday. A 16-metre hole opened up in the middle of the main carriageway as cars were driving along it. You wouldn't be out driving on a motorway, the A1, and expect that to happen, would you? What odds would you put on that happening? And yet it happened. Okay? That's kind of what this is saying. with 7 billion people on Earth, the chance that an event with a 1 in a million probability of happening won't happen today for you is 1 in 10 to the power 3040. So next time you have a miraculous happening in your life, yeah, I would suggest you don't praise God for it, you praise whoever, be grateful for it, but it's in the numbers, yeah. The world is made in a way which accounts for that. These miracles are built in. It's if you didn't get them that you'd have a real miracle and you'd need to start worrying. So, I've hit you with the anti-argument for everything I'm showing you, but nevertheless the math will prove out, and these are not things that you think you're seeing. So what would it all mean? Well, you could view the prime number cross as just another expression of universal symmetry, propagated by scientists in their continued reductionist decline. Because at first sight, you could think that this shows reality to be mechanistic or machine-like, just a stream of numbers like a computer program, with a simple command code underlying all other functions in four-dimensional space. But you're wrong if you think that. It proves the exact opposite. You may have noticed mathematicians still have their heads stuck up their proverbial. They haven't seen the pattern. And I do mean this. I've stood in front of people who have spent 20, 30 years looking for this very pattern. Yeah, that's what number theorists do. And I show them. Well, who am I? They're not going to accept it, are they? It's like, oof. But they have to. There's not one can come back and point out anything that's wrong. Except, ha, you idiots, you're using 1 as a prime number and it's not. With which point I refer them to Lancelot Hogben and Einstein's equations and so on. And say, well, he did. So, the numbers themselves not only create our three-dimensional reality, but encode that reality with infinite possibilities and free will. It does not present a mechanical framework. Okay? The universe has only one force in it, according to this, and that would be electricity, and therefore magnetism. And this force spirals around and therefore surrounds polarized light. You could say that we are crystallized, polarized light on two intersecting planes, two-dimensional intersecting planes. Now, if this knowledge was already known by someone who wanted to hide the realities and use them for personal power and wealth, well, they could do so by mystifying its origins, functions and meanings, and Kabbalah would be a very good example of that. Sacred geometry is another. It's very valid, but it's a lifetime study, and it doesn't actually show you anything. This does. This shows you where it comes from. An example of systems which utilize the same principle as this are chess, Go, and I Ching, and the tarot. And that's why they can kind of access higher levels. They literally resonate with creation and reality. Now, Peter Plichter points out in his book that on the prime number cross you will see that 2 elements are missing in nature. There are 81 stable elements in nature. There's that number. 81 stable elements in nature. If you put 1 over them, that's where you get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 into infinity. However, look at the elemental table, and I have one here, and you'll find 83. But 2 of those elements 43, technetium, and 61, promethium, are made in laboratories. They don't exist. And you, again, go and look in the textbooks. These do not exist. And yet they've been put on that table as stable elements, making it look like there's 83 of them. There's not. You take them out, there's 81. And that's where the chemical element table unifies with the prime number cross, the 1 over 81. Okay? And there's people been out there working. They've now mapped all of these elements on, and it does map perfectly. So he had finally solved the question of why 2 prime number elements in the periodic system should be missing. I've written a few laws down there. So it is true, in nature, those 2 elements are missing. They could not exist. What he's saying is, if they did exist, those numbers wouldn't work on the prime number cross. For that to work, those 2 prime numbers must be missing. Okay, I can't explain why, because he'd need to get into it all, but there's the proof. They are missing. And more than that, they've actually been found. If you get this book, The Disappearing Spoon, which is the history of the discovery of the elements, and look at those two, you find, yep, they're missing. In fact, element 81, no shit, Sherlock, is considered to be the deadliest element on the table. It unravels amino acid bonds. How strange is that? Especially as the prime number cross itself is the structure of DNA. Astronomers have identified a strange class of stars that manufacture these elements. That's strange. It's almost as if they've been taken out of our region of space, but do exist somewhere else. We can see them, but they're far enough away from us not to do what they do. That's kind of cool, I think. There are the elements mapped to the prime number cross, or just some of them anyway. So, if the secret of numbers was the lost science of antediluvian times, and the holy grail of science and creation, sorry, thank you for that, yeah. That's because I missed that. Yeah, that was one I skipped anyway. It's just a repeat of the chemical elements. Okay? So if the secret of numbers was the lost science of antediluvian times, the holy grail of science and creation, what other secrets might have been known and passed down through the bloodlines of certain families for millennia? Well, clearly there was navigation, there's architecture and science, religion and money. Now, prime numbers have hidden from mathematicians for years. You will see if you look at that lecture that I didn't show you. So you can't find these patterns. But you've seen it. You have seen it. Therefore, once you get your head around it, you will agree with that. Therefore, it's been in front of your eyes all of the time, and theirs. The experts, it's been in front of their faces, but they didn't see it. That's alchemy. That's magic. They've kept it from you by putting it right in front of your face. They do that with something else. There's something else that's been in front of your face and you've not seen it. Money. Money's alchemy. Converts one thing you have into anything else you want. But the money trick has been before your eyes just as plainly as this has, but you'll notice how hidden it is because you haven't asked the question. You never once asked, is there a pattern in prime numbers? Yeah? Did you ever once ask, who the fuck is lending our money to us? Pardon the language. You need to, because that's the key. These people know it all. Alright? And tonight, coming through all of this, I do want to move into the money kind of thing. William Grider wrote in Secrets of the Temple, above all, money is a function of faith. You know that. I don't need to go through that one with you. If you lose faith in the money process, then there's a lot of trouble will come from that. Alchemy, money and bread. Historians consider the origin of money to be around 3000 BC in the temples of Ishtar. And it was created for the use in religious rites of sacred prostitution. The priestess of the fertility goddess served her by offering themselves as representatives to her male worshippers. Could have a bit of that nowadays. That would be interesting. It was thought that if men simulated intercourse with the goddess, this would stimulate fertility in the land. So an important part of that ritual was to make a donation. A Scottish philosopher said the key to alchemy was the printing of paper money. That was in 1705. He wrote a book. And he set up a paper passing scheme, which actually then went bankrupt and everyone lost lots of money. Money itself is alchemical in that it permits the holder to convert one thing into another, and that is magic. But it's a myth that paper money is created out of nothing, for the simple reason that it's issued against your energy, time, labour and resources. It's not created out of nothing. You are what it represents, your time. These are Templars. They prostitute your time and you never even realised it. So, do stop to ponder that. Nothing is made out of nothing and it all comes from somewhere. And money comes from your time. And this is the hidden alchemy of money, making its issuance a crime, as a debt. Its issuance as a debt, a crime. And those who do it, literally, criminal vampires. So, few more quotes on money there. Right, I'll skip through these. So, have you noticed how architecture, astrology, gematria, Kabbalah, geometry, numbers, as above, so below, and family bloodlines and money keep coming into the equation, yet we don't understand it, whilst we claim that we do, to some extent. It's all complex. Cortland Dahl, one author, has established the direct family connection between Francis Bacon and the De Vere, or the De Vere's family. And de Molay, Jacques de Molay, Knights Templar. Yeah, so Francis Bacon and De Vere, same family, and de Molay. Rock and roll moment. That's one family line. Are you aware of the role of Francis Bacon in history and those around him? Like Dr. John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I, Shakespeare and Elias Ashmole, are you aware that John Dee was the original 007 Secret Service agent? 007 was his code. That's what he was called. And if you can take these things into account, why on earth would he choose religious alternatives? Are you aware that the Enochian invocation, that's the first scientific investigation into angels and psychic phenomena, is the basis of modern Western occultism? What if Kabbalah was a scam, therefore? So anyway, Shakespeare was in fact more than one character, and the names are recorded in history. You just may choose not to believe it. I recommend you read Cortland Dahl's work on that and weep. He fills out gaps that have always been there to be seen, just like the number one and the money one. From Oak Island to Shakespeare to the Templars. That's prime numbers and octagons. Octagons is what these families built around the world, laying claim to their land in days gone by, before we caught on to the fact that they had learned how to sail around the world. They had learned how to do these things, whereas the people knew nothing about it. And this was prior to the official landings in the New World, which Bacon, of course, called the New Jerusalem. This reality is imposed by these magi, and it's an illusion to hide their property claims through occult technological means. And they've gleaned this from an ancient knowledge. It's my understanding that there was a great cataclysm and things did change quite dramatically. I would say this was actually only a couple of thousand years BC. It's kind of recorded, and this is what's encoded throughout the Bible, but more importantly, what's encoded. And this is a scary one, and there's books on the book list. Go and look into this. Here's a loose concept for you. The Bible was written, yeah, we know roughly when it was written and how it was put together and all that sort of thing. And the stories in it kind of happened, but there's a lot of analogy and so on in there as well, and a lot of encoding in later editions. The actual story of the Bible, where this Jesus character and Jerusalem and all of that happened on these islands, the British Isles, and the islands that are now sunken off to the north coast. I would suggest to you that that is the biggest secret. It's all of your churches and all of your religions. Actually, they have an agreement which they call the Shem, right? And for a designated period of time, they will indulge in their criminal activities, and they can't blow the gaff on each other. They can fight, they can have wars, but at no point will they say to the public, well, hang on, they're risking your currency, you need to get rid of them. These are the secrets they will keep, and they call it the Shem. We've come to the end of that time period, incidentally, that Shem, which means you'll see your royal family changing soon. They are going to be, well, the Merovingian dynasty itself has put forward its king. You can find this in the books by Greg Hallett, who is that person. Equally, you had Lawrence Gardner writing on behalf of Prince Michael of Albany, the forgotten Stuart kings of Scotland. All right. Now they're all there. This is what's going on really. Scotland will become independent. It will have a Stuart king. That's what you'll watch in the next few years. It's all planned. The European princes, royalty around Europe, no different to our queen. This has long been planned. Our queen wanted us in Europe. She is them, the royal princess All right, there's a huge story to go on there, but behind the Bible lies events that happened on these islands, and then as ice came down from the north, people had to flee south, and a lot of this was transferred down to Egypt and so on. Now, that's a hell of a story. I'm not asking you to believe that. For some of you, for example, might have come across the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah? And of course, they were found from the time of Christ, and so, well, were they held from the time of Christ? They're written on vermilion sheepskin. And if you look that up, that was used around 1100. And do you know which family invented it? The De Molay family. So start putting it together. The Templars went out to the Middle East to implant a whole religion out there. No one had ever found Jerusalem. Tell me I'm wrong. No one ever did. No one knew where these places were. 350 AD, they started sending people out to miraculously find bits of the cross and all this sort of thing. They implanted a whole religion there, and the Templars put the Dead Sea Scrolls there 1,000 years ago. They were their writings. They were that was going to become the religion in that region, and it did. But they got kicked out a lot sooner, and these things were left in the caves. That seems to be the true story. But, unbelievable though it may be, if you can find out how they can write these things on vermilion sheepskin when that stuff wasn't around. Vermilion could mean two things, incidentally. It could mean the red print, and if that's the case, that was the most expensive ink you could ever use. It would have cost, let's say in today's terms, probably £1,000 to write that page there with that ink in those types. So it's a very elite thing. But what I'm actually referring to is it's vermilion in America. Vermilion, the town in America where the sheep and vermilion stuff comes from. Those sheep and that vermilion came from America. Okay? Or not. Go and shoot me down on that, and if you can add to that, please let me know. There's an awful lot happening out there. So, I'm going to need to kind of wind this up soon. I'm losing track of time. Where are we? Yeah, right. Can I have 5 minutes on this, and we'll wind this up. So, Zionism versus Bolshevism. Well, we all know that one nowadays. This is an article by Winston Churchill. Incidentally, I just don't know if it will affect your view of history at all. This is what he said. This was Churchill. And he also went on to say that. Pointing out exactly what Bolshevism was and what was going on in Russia. That was Winston Churchill. People wonder why he didn't get re-elected after the war. It's for reasons like this, the most popular man. There you go. That's what Winston Churchill said. People say, are the banks owned by the Jews? Show me some that aren't. Am I saying there's a Jewish conspiracy? This is where you have to stop and think, because this is where we all fall down and get accused of anti-Semitism. No, what I'm saying is that story goes so deep that those 12 tribes of Israel are your leaders around the world to this day. That's what they believe. They will tell you that. Our royals claim direct descent from the line of David, for example. The Union Jack means the union of Jacob. These are the unions of the 12 missing tribes of Israel, according to the royal princes of Europe. That's who they think they are. That's scary, because that makes Edinburgh being Jerusalem. Yeah, Babylon was York, by the way. Brilliant. You can find this in the Roman records too. Think of that though. If that were true, crazy notion like that, if that were true, and they implanted a whole religion down in the Middle East, why did they do that? Look what's happening down there to this day. While they live in their homeland in peace. And that's what's happening behind British politics. I'm not saying they're Jews, I'm saying they're Merovingian dynasty. Track the Merovingian dynasty. What are they? People think that they're a bloodline of kings that come through the centuries, and yes, they are. They were the Angevin kings of England. All right, and it's It's too big a subject to try and cram in the last few minutes, but that is the point I'm making. You have a whole history here. This is where the Templars come in, and this is where it all is a real conspiracy. And that's why no side can ever blow it, because we would all say, you've all lied to us. Well, we know they have, anyway, but it's on this basis that they really have. What that Bible was, and this comes out with the secrets of Francis Bacon, who wrote the Bible. It's kind of known now. He was the guy who organised those who put the Bible together. All right? I don't mean he wrote the words, I mean he wrote the modern version of the Bible under instruction from James and others. So, where does that take us? That's from a rabbi. This is the point I want to make. There's this mix-up between Marxism, Judaism. It's all one concept. It's all one concept. Now, to close, Dr. John Dee did all these mysterious works. This is the real occult work. Aleister Crowley's stuff came out of this. Now, my point is, Crowley was a nutter, as is anyone else who's done this angel summoning, without realising what they're actually communicating with. And I use the word nutter rather politely. You have to be mad to talk to something like that if you don't know what it is, though people do. Now, my point is that John Dee did this whole investigation, and it turned into occult summoning rituals that the Order of the Golden Dawn, for example, drew directly from Dee's stuff. I, however, say, no. Dee was looking at prime numbers. Dee was getting information about numbers from the angels or whoever this was communicating it, and I was told I was crazy. Well, randomly, let's just go through from the Mysterium, Primus, Liber and Tertius. This is in 1558, and wherever I saw a comment about numbers, I just wrote it down randomly. All right, but they're on every page. I am the end and have no number. I am number within a number, and every number is my number. And your number lives in the rest. Your number is infinite, and it will be the end of things. It is number without number. His number is not heaven. Do you get the point? I can go through this, and here's a good one. Understand that 7 names thou must comprehend, as many letters in the whole as there are places in the circle. Some letters are significant in themselves, indeed no letters, but double numbers being the name of God. Thou hast erred in the first name, in setting it down as A, that is twice A. This is the angels telling him he's made a mistake and he needs to kind of put it right. Thou shalt find 7 names proceeding from 3. There's the 7 and 3 again earlier. And only but one letter, and that's the letter A. Account thou. This is where they're switching letters for numbers. He gave power to them in heaven. He is 1 in 7. He is twice 3. He is 7 in the whole. Thou must refer thy numbers therein contained to the upper circle, for from thence all things... Are you getting this? You know, the wolf does not administer the number. Hey, there's one for Wolfie up there, yeah? Numerus primus, the first number. Isn't a prime number? The 3 angles of the triangle open, and in the lower point there appeared a great A, and in the other corner 3 circles of equal bigness. This square is within a round, squaring of the circle, etc. These are the lights of your knowledge. How great is your vanity? You knew these numbers to be in God, in the world and in the minor world, etc. I won't go on. Oh, here's one, sorry. His power with the rest of his 6 perfect ministers. I hope you're getting some of this. John Dee's work was based on the mathematics or the geometry of the prime number cross. I don't think he got it. I think people after him sussed that out, and that's why technology took off. And if you're not convinced by now, there's even more quotes there, all about numbers, but I do like the last 2 I've put on. They're the names of God. Tetragrammaton and primumaton, right? That's like, okay, so that's got nothing to do with prime either. But just a few thoughts on that. So at what point? There they all were. These slides will be available to you. At what point, even at first glance, as someone who hasn't heard of Dr. Dee before even, at what point is this not about prime numbers and mathematics? At what point doesn't the entire history of this stuff involve the Kabbalah and the disputes concerning Jewish kings and magicians? So, I'd like to end this by changing subject yet again, very, very briefly, because I know I'm running so far over. And just to finish off these quotes, there's another one, by the way, famous one from the Bible. A time, times, and time and a half is a great quote from the Bible, and people have been trying to work out what that means forever. Well, there is kind of what it means, and that's what you get from it, the nonagon. And this brings us to the Greek Ennead and completing all 9 numbers again. I'm not going through that. I'm sorry, I have run out of time for that, but I do want to add this. We've just had a traumatic event in this country. And we need to kind of pull this all together now. These voting out, yes, we've Brexited. Whatever happens now, my mission has always been to point out that your money is issued as a debt, and it doesn't have to be that way. So, for the first time in history, I think, we have politicians of both parties, or all parties, lining up, none of them fulfilling what they should for the public. None of them have an idea how to proceed from here. And yet, I do. And I've said it for years. So, I'm going to propose, and I will be detailing this and putting it out there so you will come across it, I hope. Get in touch with me on Facebook if you want to keep up with this. But I'm saying the financial solution always has been there. It's been kept from you. Tomorrow we can issue our money debt-free. There are problems with that, but they're surmountable problems. We can get over that. And we now, in these times, need to let our leaders know that this is possible. We have a truth movement in this country with minds in it that far exceed those in our government at the minute. And they need the people, yeah? They need the people. They don't know what to do. In fact, they're going to go on and do the same old rubbish yet again, no doubt. So I will be approaching them, and I'll be putting a full monetary policy before them. It's not that hard, actually, because Jeremy Corbyn actually has it in his manifesto as we speak. It's just they didn't want you to see that bit. That's why they had a parliamentary debate on it, and not many people turned up. I think there's 4 people in it or something. It's there. The solution is there. Right? And now's the time for the people to stand up and tell our leaders that we have a solution, right? And we do. You might not understand it yet. I'll be putting it out. I've spoken on it for years. It's the one solution to the economic problem. It's also the one thing that they will never grant to us. So you must be aware of that. But I ask you, are they not going to bend over backwards now? Only now? For the first time ever? Are they going to listen to people? You bet they are, especially if we do it right. And I've been planning this for years, and I never thought I'd get to this moment. I gave up hope last week. I thought we are going to be in Europe, and that is the end of it. That is your new world order. I'm sorry if there's anyone who wanted to go into Europe. I've studied this stuff for since it started, and I know who they are, so I will speak out about it. And there is a solution. Ladies and gentlemen, that really is the point. These are the magi. They issue your money. You work for no one but them. And if your life is comfortable, you're obviously working well enough for them. If it's not, you probably didn't. And it's time that we change this. So thank you so much for coming anyway. But keep an eye on this. I'm going to form a signet committee, little baby signets, and we're going to grow into swans, all right? That's the idea. Nothing to join, just a committee to think about, and then come and join us and go and ask a question, because I'm going to do this, all right? Now is the time. I'm given a month or two. Thank you very much.